At dawn in ancient Israel, as the golden sun slowly rose over a quiet village, peace seemed to rest upon the land. Stone houses glowed softly under the morning sky, yet behind one humble door lived a woman whose heart knew no rest. Inside a small, dimly lit house sat a widow, young, weary, and burdened by sorrow. Empty clay jars surrounded her like silent witnesses to her lack. On straw mats nearby, her two sons slept, unaware that their future hung by a fragile thread. As she looked at them, memories flooded her heart. Not long ago, she had stood beside a grave, her tears soaking the dust as she buried her husband. The man who once protected her was gone, and with him, security vanished. The echo of mourning still lived within her soul. Now another shadow loomed. The creditor came, his presence cold and threatening. Standing in her doorway, he demanded payment. His voice carried no mercy. If the debt remained unpaid, her sons would be taken away as servants. Fear wrapped tightly around her heart. When night fell, despair crushed her spirit. She sank against the wall, covering her mouth to silence her sobs so her children would not hear. She felt alone, until a gentle hand rested on her shoulder. A neighbor whispered words of hope, of a prophet, a man of God named Elisha. With nothing left but faith, the widow rose. At sunrise, she walked the dusty road, her steps uncertain but her heart clinging to hope. Soon she arrived at Elisha's dwelling, surrounded by others seeking wisdom. When Elisha appeared, peace followed him. His eyes were kind, his presence calm. The widow fell to her knees before him, her tears soaking the ground as her pain poured from her lips. She told him everything: her loss, her debt, her fear for her sons. Elisha listened carefully. Then he asked a simple question: "What do you have in your house?" The widow looked down at her empty hands and whispered, "Nothing, except a small jar of oil." At that moment, Elisha's eyes brightened. Wisdom filled his face. He gave her instructions that sounded strange, yet carried divine authority. "Go, borrow empty jars from your neighbors, many jars. Then go inside, shut the door, and pour." Though confused, the widow believed. She went from house to house, knocking humbly. One neighbor gave 2 jars, another gave 3. Soon the jars multiplied. Her sons ran beside her, helping, laughing, hope returning to their young hearts. The community responded, and by evening, her home was filled wall to wall with empty vessels. When the door closed behind them, silence filled the room. By the soft glow of an oil lamp, the widow lifted her small jar. Her sons watched closely as she poured. Oil flowed. The first jar filled, then another, yet the small jar never ran dry. Eyes widened, hearts raced, joy replaced fear. Faster and faster they worked, oil flowing like liquid gold, filling every vessel. Finally, the last jar was brought. It filled completely. When there were no more empty jars, the oil stopped. Silence followed. Holy silence. Surrounded by abundance, the widow and her sons fell to their knees, lifting their hands in gratitude. Light streamed through the window as heaven seemed to smile upon them. With joy overflowing, the widow ran back to Elisha. Breathless, she told him everything. He smiled knowingly and said, "Go, sell the oil, pay your debt, and live on the rest." Soon the marketplace buzzed as the widow sold the oil. Coins exchanged hands. Her sons stood proudly by her side. At sunset, she stood once more at her doorway, this time not in fear, but in victory. She handed the creditor his payment. Her sons stood free beside her. Behind them, jars of oil glowed warmly in the fading light. What once began with loss ended in freedom. What began with fear ended in faith. And what seemed too small in human hands became more than enough in God's.